Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Recollection Step, a Grand Archive TCG podcast, part of the Maindeck podcast family. I'm Dan.
And I'm Taylor. Dan, it's been a minute since I've seen you, since I moved out of town. As you can tell, I'm not in my parents' basement anymore. Actually, you probably can't tell, like, just generically. I'm in some room. You don't know where this room is.
Yeah, these people have no idea.
Yeah. Okay, well, anyway, I'm not in my parents' basement anymore, so I'm living pretty large right now. I'm feeling very good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It actually hasn't been that long since we had a later recording before, or did I just post it late? I think we recorded late, right?
We recorded late. Yes,
yeah.
We recorded like the Tuesday after we normally do.
And I probably posted late anyway, because that's
what we do here.
Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So it hasn't been that long, but I'm sure for you, it's felt like a long time with all the moving process going on. You get through that okay?
We got everything like unloaded. We're moved in, and we still got some stuff to unpack, but for the most part, we're getting settled. So it went pretty well. Pretty excited here. So
excellent. Now the next step is to get your LGS going with Grand Archive.
Yes. Yeah. I'm excited to start diving into that soon. I gotta go see what they've got going on. I haven't been over there yet. When we were scoping out Duluth, I stopped by there really quick just to see what it was. It was very, it seems like it was like J-Dubs like 15 years ago.
Okay.
So yeah, it could be really cool in the future.
It's called Room for Growth. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All I know is that from what I sent you, they support nostalgics. So
they sure do.
We're on the wrong side of the Kickstarter betting when the Grand Archive and Nostalgics Kickstarters were running simultaneously.
Yeah. We'll get that figured out. We'll get them on the right track here.
Yeah.
So,
good.
Yep. Because I need some Grand Archive in my life. Although I'm gonna have to start hitting up webcam events now too, since I wasn't doing that before. But now I have a really good excuse to do that too. So
yeah.
It'll be good stuff. Today let's just dive into it here. We're going to talk about level 3 decks and, why you want to go to a level 3 and the cool things about going to level 3 and how you get to level 3 and not just die to like the rude, like level 1 Xander players in your meta or the people who, think it's still like August 2023 and they're still playing allies. Like let's move on here and let's play the cool champions. All right.
This is a great topic. I was really excited when you brought this up because it's a comment I've heard from a lot of people who have said, just in random conversations, like, oh, I just really prefer playing level 3 decks. I like playing that because they're fun. But I've also heard people saying, like, I like them because they're fun, but I hate losing so many cards. I don't like being so down on cards and then I lose the game when that happens. So, hopefully a little bit of this too is just some of the advice to kind of make sure you're doing it right and able to win the game, because these level 3 decks certainly can win the game. They have a long and storied history of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. We've seen Luxem Xander decks do well. We've seen Lorraine decks do well for the whole course of the game. Obviously
Merlin's never been very good.
Merlin is, a little rough. I think she needs a little bit of help. But I mean, actually, though, could we get her a little bit of help?
Yeah. No, she's good. She's fine, Taylor. She's fine. Crux is fine. We don't need anything else. But Sylvie and Tristan.
Sylvie, yep. Yeah. Like, there's a lot of really good level 3 decks in the game right now. Even though the last couple months we've seen the resurgence of, level 1 and level 2 decks come back here with a vengeance. There's still plenty of room here for level 3 decks to thrive. So, obviously just getting into it, like why you want to go to level 3 is just cause it's cool, right? Like you get all these new powerful abilities and effects and cards to play. Like the champions just have like way cooler art. Like you see the progression of like Lorraine starting as some like random squire and like becoming like this, like, this knight that is running around Cambria, and taming massive ethereal spirits, gods or whatever. So like the progression is great. And then obviously like there's just so many cool cards and stuff to play. Like it's just one of the best like ways I've seen like the kind of RPG go from zero to hero fantasy really like laid out in a card game.
Yeah, I when we first learned the rules of the game, this was one of the things that stood out to me as a major positive for the game. As someone who plays way too many like attempts to actually play every single TCG that enters the market, which is just absurd. Don't even try to do that at this point. I've played a lot of different systems, and I pinpointed a while ago, really, that something that I prefer in my card games is, and it's not always like an angle people think about too much, but it's really about the narrative of the game. Or you could call it the Ludo narrative if you want to sound really like you have some sort of college degree in gameology or whatever. But the game tells a story in a way when you play it is the basic idea. And I played games that are less interesting to me when they specifically never do anything mechanically to escalate the power and the excitement of the game to reach a particular climax at some point. And I'll like straight throw it out there because a lot of people love the game, but I didn't. Flesh and Blood is a game that, well, everyone will, and I've heard it many times, correct me and say there are some characters that do build up stuff like great, but a lot of the characters in the game in that game are built around you start with a set of equipment. I know, Taylor, you played a bit of Flesh and Blood too. You start with your set of equipment, and your equipment breaks throughout the turns of the game, and you kind of de-escalate in power a little bit, and you're ultimately just like a slugfest, just trying to get the last points of damage in to close it out.
Yeah, and actually, I want to interrupt you quick because there's the equipment angle, but there's also just like the cards you play. So in Flesh and Blood, you've got basically 3 different versions of each card. One is more powerful but generates less resources, and going down the scale to one that's less powerful but generates more resources. And generally throughout the game, you're playing the more powerful cards. And in that game, you also reuse all the cards you use for resources. So you'll draw them again eventually. So now you're drawing these less powerful cards towards the course of the game. And so like when you get to the end of the game and you're trying to beat your opponent down, you're both just grinding each other down. You're each are like throwing down like the least powerful cards you're going to be playing at that point in the game. Right. And like, again, like I haven't played in probably since like set 3 or 4 released, I think. So it's probably pretty different now. And there were still like, even at that point, there were characters that just like built up into like this big, like kind of fireball of damage that just kills you. Yeah. But like the game inherently just really has like this grinding down effect, where you don't really see that as much in Grand Archive in level 3 decks specifically. I actually do think, I'm glad you brought up Flesh and Blood right away, because I think like ally decks and level 1 decks are a good analog to that, because they like basically you beat those decks just by grinding them out of resources because they aren't accelerating or scaling into the late game like level 3 decks will. Yeah. Like you get, as soon as you unlock Terra cards for Kong Ming, like it becomes almost a different deck. And all of a sudden you have these really big advantages that you didn't have before. Whereas like ally decks, like they don't get to a level 3. They just play their card generating cards from the material deck. And as soon as they're out of those cards, if they haven't beat you yet, they're probably not going to beat you because they don't have any other way to like, generate advantage anyway. Yeah,
exactly. That's exactly how we've always said, you want to beat ally decks, you just have to run them out of steam and then they're cooked. And like I think you're totally spot on. That's a great analog, very similar to how I think a lot of the core mechanics of Flesh and Blood are built to sort of just not have anything inherently in the mechanics. Again, there are characters and stuff that do that, but in the inherent mechanics of the game, it's not built to have any sort of escalation. And instead, I found myself in the past more often attracted to games where there was a built-in, like very simple example. So many people played Magic the Gathering. That is a game where all you're doing is, and all the games that have been inspired by it, building resources throughout the game. And then your deck is built with a curve of, you have the stronger cards that you can only play later in the game. And then you build up to those. And suddenly, every game is like, boom, like 10 damage to this thing and like whatever. Um, but also games like Taylor, you and I both played the Score Dragon Balls, Panini Dragon Ball Z or Score. I don't know if you played that one too, but they're the same game.
I played a little bit. Yep.
Okay. Yeah, and those games were like when I saw Grand Archives rules, one of the first things I thought was, okay, cool. They have like your main character that levels up to new forms as the game goes on. And in that game, it was so fun to get to like especially in this. I have it over here, the little my Baby Saga GT deck. In Dragon Ball GT, when you have like level 5s, level 6 Super Saiyan 4 Goku, and they're like just like they get this numbers scaled ridiculous. He's like, he has 200 million power, and you pay 4 resources to do 24 life cards of damage to your opponent, draw 4 cards, whatever. Like I'm in my heart, there's a Timmy in me. And when I see like, okay, I level up and I get bigger and bigger and everything gets gigantic, like I get excited about that kind of thing. So really a lot of this is just saying like the core mechanics of Grand Archive, having this level 0 through 3 and then leveling to 3 and then unlocking powerful advanced element cards and new abilities that are super strong, like Merlin's. We'll talk about more a little bit later, but that to me was one of the first things where I saw that and I was like, I'm locked in. Like this is the kind of game I'm looking for. Whereas when I played games like Flesh and Blood, where it wasn't part of the core mechanics, I was like, it just didn't latch on for me.
Yeah. I mean, and like just talking about how powerful these cards are in comparison to like basic element cards and normal element cards, right? Like your kind of what has been the base stat line, like the acceptable stat line in an ally for most of the game in norm and basic elements has been a 2-3 for 3, right?
Yeah.
That's, excellent rate. Like that's exactly what you want. We're kind of starting to see almost like a 2-4 for 3 or 4 somewhere in there now, with some of the stuff from Mortal Ambition. Like some of the effects are kind of skewing that a little bit. But really like still the 2-3 for 3 is really what you want. Right. And if we compare that to like another 3-cost ally in an advanced element, Exia, right, has Blood Bond Bladesworn. Which is a 3-6 for 3. So already on its own, it just beats the 2-3 for 3, like no help needed. And then of course, that Bladesworn also has another effect that like scales its power even further. So it just continues to get better, right? So it just completely outclasses this ally. Like you're like, oh, I can play this cool, this wind 2-3 for 3, and like I'm going to do some damage and it's going to defend well, and I've got cards that are going to help protect it from other 2-3 for 3s. And then you go to level 3 and you say, I don't care about any of that, I'm just going to eat it with 1 card and we're done. So you just get so many cool things like that. And again, like looking at spells and basic elements, right, we've got Sparklight, which is deal 2 damage to any target for 2, and if you're a mage, it deals 3 damage instead.
Unpreventable.
So that's a huge part of the reason. That's actually a good one. I should have picked a different one. Let's pick Focus Flames, actually. So Focus Flames is just deal 4 damage to an ally for 2. And if you're a mage, it costs 1. So that's cool. As soon as you're an Arcane Mage, Rai, you get access to a spell called Arcane Blast, which deals 11 damage to any target for potentially 0 reserve. Like it just is a free spell if you have enough levels. And Rai also has we'll get into a little bit here later. Very shortly, actually, he has an effect that scales his level with arcane cards in his banishment. So he gets to level 3, and then all of a sudden he's actually level like 8 or 9, depending on how he got there. And like he's just throwing out Arcane Blast for 2 or 1 or 0, which is so much better than Focus Flames. Like Focus Flames is it's a really good fire card, but like Arcane Blast just blows it out of the water, right? Voltaic Spear is another example of an advanced element arcane card, which is similar, but just way better. Deals 3 damage to any target, 5 if it's an ally. I think that also costs 2. And then you can banish it from your graveyard for additional effects. So like, again, just advanced element cards are just so much better than your basic element cards. Like it just completely blows them out of the water. Like the effects are so much more powerful, just completely different power scale. And then on top of that too, like you just have so many more ways to accumulate card advantage with advanced element cards too. We very rarely see basic element cards that like say more than like draw 1 card, right? Like we see a fair amount of draw a card. Like there's a lot of basic element cards that do replace themselves, and you kind of need those to like just make the game flow nicely and play well. But as soon as you get to advanced elements, you're drawing multiple cards off of one card instead of just, cards replacing themselves. A very prominent example at the moment in the metagame is Gaia's Blessing that Sylvie has really propped up these days. It's a regalia that costs 1. And you play with the top of your deck revealed, and you can play allies and beasts from the top of your deck as if they were in your hand. So you just get to play like a stream of allies and beasts off the top of your deck for this one card. Like it's not uncommon to see you play like 2 or 3 like slimes and slime Sylvie with this. They just chain through so well. And like there's just nothing like that in basic elements.
Yeah, when you compare advanced element regalia to basic element regalia, it is a totally different power scale. So it makes sense. It's one of the things where a lot of people, like I said, they get into the game and they pick up a starter deck, and the first thing they do when they get the basic rules and they go, okay, I'm on my own, I can do whatever I want. They go level, like as fast as they can, because they want to get to, it's obvious where the cool effects are and what all the cool cards are. And they get drawn in by these level 3 abilities that just sound absolutely insane. Like even in basic starter decks, you were mentioning Rye earlier, for example. And there's a host of these sort of like effects where even when you crack open a starter deck and you look at the character, you're going to just immediately go, I need to be this as fast as possible, which is sometimes going to give you a bad experience is one of the big problems, which we'll talk about in a little bit too. That's going to be our second main section here. But some of the effects that you do get to see when you are reaching level 3 that make things very exciting for you, or if you're opening Mortal Ambition starter decks right away, you open the Jin starter deck, you find the pretty red card version of Jin, and it just says Jin literally can't die. Jin has immortality except during his end phase, meaning that you can be at, I've seen 50 damage on a Jin, and you do not lose the game for having lethal damage on you until the game moves to specifically your end phase. Then it's checks. Oh, hey, are you dead? Well, now you're actually dead then. Giving Jin this like insane, super unique ability in the game so far to just shrug off absolutely anything that's happening to him. Your Sylvie decks are getting you down. They'll blast you with Storm Slime and you go, okay, cool, thanks. Now I'm going to swing back because Jin's whole thing is scaling off of the damage he's been dealt. I'm going to swing back for 30 damage and good luck. That unique ability, is enticing and alluring and quite powerful when you have the rest of the shell built well around it. Some other cool things you see, like Luxem Xander, as you mentioned earlier, Taylor, very popular deck at various points in the game's lifespan so far. And Luxem Xander has Xander Blinding Steel, who has the ability to, at the start of your recollection phase, you get to reveal all the cards in your memory, and your opponent has to put a card from their hand into memory for each Luxem card revealed, which totally shuts down their ability to interact with you on your turn, which is very cool, like assassin, like blinding orb thing, basically like, nope, okay, you're not doing anything now, and I'm going to do whatever. But what it's used for most often is the fact that all of the really sick advanced element Luxem cards say, hey, when you reveal this from your memory, you get to do something for free without having to spend any resources. And so these Luxem decks are building with all of their ways to recover 3 on Luxem site and draw cards when they reveal Gleaming Cut. And then they have, of course, Lightweaver's Assault, their win con, which gets to ping a bunch of stuff when it's revealed and then can be activated from hand to deal an amount of damage equal to the number of cards in your memory. So they'll ping, clear the board, heal, whatever, till they get enough cards and then go, okay, Lightweavers, 8/8, like boom, you're dead.
Yep.
I guess I'll just let you keep going. You can read some of the other ones.
Basically, what we're trying to say here is like this is a whole like design space that you won't see in basic element cards. Like Immortality is a card, like as an effect, has only shown up on 3 cards so far, so it's not very common to begin with. But on 2 of those cards are Exia cards, advanced element cards. The other one is fire. And I suspect we'll see it on a lot more advanced element cards in the future before we see it on a norm element card or a basic element card again. It's just like these really unique effects are going to take up a design space that you cannot play with in an allies deck or a level 1 deck, or like even Nico, right? Nico has some like really cool effects, but like they're still in the realm of like Water's design space. Like all of her mill that she does, all of her damage prevention, even the recovery off of Mage Vein Lash, those are all things that like Water does on its own. Like that's part of Water's identity, where advanced element has just like, they just have so many other parts of their identity that are so much more like astounding compared to like their basic element counterparts, right? Like again, even like Tristan and her ominous shadow tokens at level 3, like being able to just have it in her kit to like redirect attacks to those tokens as well. It's just something you will never see at like a basic element. Like there's just, it's tokens, especially actually, I think have been mostly relegated to advanced elements. We like power cells, we see at basic elements, we see some like 1/1 stuff with automaton drones. But even though like the drones, they're so much better in Neos. Like they're so much more powerful in Neos compared to the basic elements. All the basic elements, I think if I'm remembering correctly, they all just create 1/1 drones. Neos creates 2/2 drones, or I guess they're technically 1/1 drones with a buff counter. But like just inherently, right, like all these effects, if they're done in both basic and advanced elements, they're done more powerfully in advanced elements. And oftentimes they're just unique to advanced elements. So like this is why you want to go to level 3. Like it gives you a power level in the game that you do not get at level 1 and 2. And it's often the case that if you spend multiple turns at level 3 compared to your opponent, you will be winning that game. I think it's like incredibly, like one of the decks we've really been trying to make work since Mortal Ambition released was Kongming. Cause like, that's just a really cool champion. Like she gets like shifting currents and you move it around, you do fun fiddly things with this. Right. But we've often asked, like, what does she bring to the table in comparison to other like level 3 decks? And like, she kind of has like a difficulty closing the game out often the times, but like Terra as an advanced element just has so much card advantage built in that she sees so many cards. It's insane. And if you also aren't going to level 3 against Kongming, you're going to have a really hard time like beating her because she's just going to bury you in card advantage that you cannot get at basic elements. I've really enjoyed playing her into ally decks. I've really enjoyed playing her into Nico. I've enjoyed playing her into like Xander, like Fire Xander aggro. It's been the level 3 decks that really give you that like pushback, and that's because they're the only decks that get to that same power level. Level 2 decks just aren't getting there. Level 1 decks are not going to get there ever. So Kongming, like, and level 3 decks in general, just like as long as you have the time, you're going to beat the level 1, level 2 strategies.
Yeah. And I just want to like mention, just from a design perspective, that this to me again was like not just the fact that you could level to 3, which obviously got me excited right when the game was revealed, but seeing this sort of clever balance of the advanced element cards and having advanced element abilities, like you said, all having super unique, powerful abilities, but they're only unlocked when you sort of take the steps to deliberately shed cards to get to a lower amount. Like it was this very obvious risk reward thing to me. You have to put in your deck very powerful cards, but you can't play them until later in the game. And the only way in the core rules to get to that later stage was to lose at least 6 cards, lose 6 cards from your hand to level to 1, 2, and 3. And then now you could activate that, giving you this like, like kind of like we were saying with Kongming there, like you get to that stage and now you have the ability to draw like 1 million cards back up. If you can survive to that point. And it was really, for me, it was seeing that brilliance of this, like, okay. So I have these routes I can take. I can go to 3. I can pace out how I want to get there. A lot of decision making there that I got like already very enticed by. But then when I'm even at the deck building stage, if I'm going to 3, I have to like survive at 3 until I can build that advantage up. I can stay at 1 and stay at this higher count of cards for the longer amount of time and ride that advantage to help me out instead, where like instead of having to go down and kind of play a couple like awkward turns where I'm not able to do as many things, like we talked about before, Taylor, thinking about the number of cards in your hand as a rough gauge at like how many actions you can do in a turn. If you have like 7 or 8 cards in your hand, you can do 2 things ish on a turn. If you have 3 or 4 cards in your hand, that's like you could probably only really do 1 thing on a turn, right? It kind of breaks down that way. So it was like that realization of, okay, my level 1 deck, that's going like, I got 2 things per turn guaranteed. And I'm just going to try and ride that consistency and in order to win the game, versus those level 3 decks that then are going to go, two things, 1.5 things, 1 thing, 1 thing, 2 things, 3 things, 4 things as the game scales on, right?
And it's 2 really powerful things, 3 really powerful things, 4 really powerful things. It's like you just get buried in card advantage or in just advantage. Yeah.
To me, that was like that was like one of my moments I remember as we were digging and more into the game. And like that occurred to me, that was like a while in. That was like around Ascent Houston or something when I had that like revelation. I was like, whoa, wait a second. I started to understand the wider tapestry of the game. Like this game is so cool. Like, how did they come up with this? It's so sweet. So, the level 3s are just like, they're an integral part. Those are the advanced elements of how that whole tapestry weaves together.
Yep. And one last part before we move on, we did not touch on at all, which I did not really mean to kind of like, underrate this or leave this kind of just as a footnote, but like, as you level up, you also get more health, which like, kind of obvious, but like, that's actually like really important too, for like helping to get out of kill range of a lot of these aggro decks too. Like, if you have to stay at level 1, you're always in threat of like a Rending Flames hitting you for a bunch of damage, or an Icebound Slam hitting you for like 8 more damage, right? Like you only have, somewhere between 15 and like 24 health to work with if you're going to level 2, depending on the level 2. But most of the time, like other than Nico, there's a lot of decks that just are staying at level 1 if they aren't going to level 3. So like you have between 15 and 20 health, which is not a lot.
Well, if you're level 1 Guardian with Serene Spirit, you're actually at 26. So
you do have a lot of health, like if that's what you're playing, right? Like there are ways to change that. But if you are a Guardian that goes to level 3 with Serene Spirit, you have 36 health. So you just have so much health.
Yeah.
And like it makes like I actually think level 3 decks that are prepped for like fire aggro decks are going to be like better positioned against those decks than level 1 decks, even if they're prepared for the fire aggro decks, just because like you get out of kill range, like you just add more health continuously. Whereas like level 1, you better continue to draw the cards you need to prevent a Rending Flames from killing you or a Fiery Momentum from killing you, because like they're going to continue to have those cards, and you're not going to have the health to survive.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So yeah, I mean, those are all the really cool reasons why you want to go to level 3, like the strategic reasons why you want to go to level 3. But how do you get there? And Dan, before we get into how we get there, why don't you please tell our listeners and viewers how they can help support Maindeck and help us get to level 3 in life and YouTube and podcast world?
Nice. Yeah, that was a great segue. If you want to help Maindeck get to level 3, if you enjoy the Recollection Step and you want to see us level up and get even more powerful and have finally give Taylor access to Crux. He's been waiting for it. He needs it. This man needs Crux in his life. You can help us in a number of ways. You can go ahead and interact with the video. All of those things all the YouTube interaction things that everybody tells you to do with the videos, they're honestly really helpful. So you can do all that stuff. You can like the video. You can comment down below. Let us know what your favorite level 3 champion is, what you love about level 3 elements, or your favorite advanced element cards at level 3 that you love to play and make your opponent sad with. I know it's going to be Ghost of Pendragon, but that's fine. You can put that down too. And you can also, if you're listening on a podcast platform, you can leave us a 5-star review. And on your 5-star review, you can say, hey, this is the best podcast for talking about level 3s. Nobody's doing it, but they did, and I appreciate that. You can say whatever you want. I don't. That's all good. But thank you so much for doing all of that, all those engagement, all the engagement, all those interactions. They all help us out a ton in other people finding the podcast, listening to it, and spreading the good word of Grand Archive. And then finally, if you want to support Maindeck financially, we're doing a lot of traveling this year. We're gonna need to be able to meet you guys at the Grand Archive events. The financial support is always super helpful. You can do that, of course, by shopping for your singles on TCG Player. You can go purchase Grand Archive singles at tcgplayer.com, but don't just use that link because that won't help us at all. Instead, go to bit.ly/shop TCGs. That's bit.ly/shop TCGs, or click the link down in the description below. And that way you'll be able to shop using our affiliate link, and then a little kickback gets sent to us when you buy those spicy new advanced element cards for your newest level 3 deck. So thank you all so much for your support.
Dan, question.
Yeah.
Unrelated to level 3s. Would you rather do an ad read like that for Maindeck, or would you rather do an ad read for like Orida French fries, or like whatever sponsor we could get, like
we are open to a podcast sponsor, and you know what? I do like French fries, so I'm not going to turn down Orida French fries as a sponsor. But yeah, if we ever have someone who wants to sponsor us, that ad read will be replaced by a sponsorship ad read. But for now, I just advertise ourselves because you guys are already here, and I'm holding you a captive audience right now, where that means you are forced to listen to me. I try to make them a little entertaining each time.
They're pretty good. I like the ad reads. I'm here for them.
Okay,
but I mean, I'm kind of also captive too. So
yeah, you're very captive.
Yeah.
You're
okay. Anyway, all right. So we've established why we want to go to level 3. How do you get there? Because getting to level 3 is not like an easy task in this game. That's like you said earlier. Like a lot of players who pick up their first starter deck, they go through, they see the basic element cards. They're like, oh, these are cool. They see the advanced element cards and like, these are way better. And then they rush to level 3, and they get to level 3 and they have no cards left in hand because it's expensive to get to level 3. And then they're like, well, now what do I do? So we're going to help you out and help, just go over how you get to level 3 and still take game actions, right? Because again, like we mentioned, the biggest hurdle to level 3 is that it costs 6 cards, really. Your level 1 costs 1 card to materialize. Your level 2 costs 2 cards to materialize. Your level 3 costs 3 cards to materialize. So no matter what, you're down 6 cards by the time you get to level 3.
And here's the thing too, like the reason this is so rough is that the starter decks are not always built with those kind. You kind of mentioned like cards that draw cards, and it's sort of like a subtle thing that people pick up as they're learning the game. But like when you play a card, let me back up a step. In order to actually lose those cards to level, you can't just be like, yeah, pitch whatever. You have to put them down in memory. So you have to play other cards. And the reason this is so rough is you start with a 7 card hand, and let's say you're going first. Then the first turn you have 7, you go to 0. That makes sense. Then the second turn you have 8 cards, but you lost 1 because you went to 1 right away. So you're excuse me, I want to step back again. At 0, you played a something in order to level. That was where I was going with this initially. So let's say you put an ally down of some kind, right? So you're actually down to 6 cards total because that ally went and played and it's not coming back, right? So then when the next turn you draw a card, you lose a card to level. So you're back down to 6, and you have to put down you have to play something else in order to get cards in memory. So you play another ally. So you're down to 5. You draw a card to 6, you lose 2, you're down to 4. And then you have to put down another 2, 3 for 3. Like we were saying, you put down your 3 cards, play your ally. Okay. So you're down to 3, and then you draw a card and you level, and you have 1 card left in hand. Right. And so the issue is not just that you lose 6 cards. It's that in a lot of those starter decks, because we're not instead of playing cards that draw more cards back into hand so that we can keep at the same number while we go shed cards to level, that would keep us up to 4 cards instead of 3 if every card just replaced itself, instead of 1, excuse me. Then we're just putting you put down a random dude or something. When you don't see floating memory, when you don't see cards that draw whatever out of those starter decks, that's where people have had the worst experiences and have said oh, this game's terrible. I went to level 3 and then I couldn't do anything. I remember some early conversations in the Discord where the devs were kind of like people were like, hey, people are having bad experiences, and like there's some recognition of like, yeah, we want to try and like guide people, or maybe dungeon guide people the right way in order to make sure people are like leveling and not being completely empty. But at the same time, at some point it's like, well, they have to have done that and go, well, that sucked. Maybe I should try doing it differently instead of just like doing that one thing. And so to some degree, there's like a player responsibility, just like, well, you try it different, do another game, but don't do the thing you did, and see if it works out any better. And then people find when they do it the right way, and they pace things out, or they find ways to get advantage through floating memory or drawing cards and stuff, then they can play the game when they get to level 3 instead.
Yeah, I mean, because that's the thing, right? Like the Grand Archive is actually like a game that really rewards experimentation. So if you're finding something doesn't work, like try something else, and you'll often be rewarded for it. In the same way that like the getting to level 3 is extremely expensive as far as cards go, it also is really expensive as far as like tempo goes, and like the kind of the influence you're giving up to affect the game. Not influence as in like number of cards in hand, but like your ability to shift the game in a direction you want. You have to give a lot of that up, because in order to get to your next champion level, you usually have to materialize that champion level, which means you're not materializing something else. And we often talk about how the materialization step or materialization phase is the most important phase of the game, because it lets you tutor up whatever card you need for that situation in order to put the game into a state that works for you. You're giving that up in order to get to level 1. You're giving that up to get to level 2 and to level 3. So it's 3 materialization phases you're giving up, or like just already to get to level 3. So beyond just giving up the 6 cards from your actual influence, your named influence to get to level 3, you're now giving up essentially 3 turns too. So like your level 3 really has to have a good payoff in order for this to be worth it, right? Because now all of a sudden, like not only are you 6 cards down, you're 3 turns behind, and how do you even get back into this game at this point? And oftentimes, like even if you have a really strong level 3, like you could be playing pre-banned list Sword of Avarice, like this is legal again. You can play this again. You still are probably gonna have a really hard time getting back into the game if you get to level 3 and can still just draw like 2 cards continuously over and over again. If you had to take, and level hard to 3 and go down all those cards and lose all those turns, like it's not going to happen. Your opponent has had too much free time in the game, right? So these are the things that are impeding you getting to level 3. And so like Dan said, a lot of times like with the starter decks, if you're just rushing to level 3, even if your deck is designed for it, like that can spell disaster, right? Like oftentimes it can be correct to like take a turn, materialize a non-level, and get, just find something to do that turn that doesn't like hinder you. And then next turn you can level, and you'll be in a better, more advantageous spot because you might have more cards to work with, or like the card you materialized the turn before is helpful, something like that, right?
Yeah. I know Mitch on the main deck competitive team, Mitch and I have had discussions in the past, a lot of debate about like even looking at a deck that we all consider like very simple to play, slimes, right? Mm-hmm. We've debated the merits of rushing to 3 and then taking advantage of Sylvie, like you said, a powerful level 3 like Sylvie's, which allows you to just play a slime for free from your hand, and often it's like an ethereal that draws a card and starts to replenish things immediately and pushes huge damage and stuff. Versus Mitch, who was really about I remember I was like shocked. He said, well, in just about every game I turn to backup charger instead to draw a card. And I was like I'm not saying it's bad. I do that too, but I think not as often as he does. I played more matches where I thought I needed the tempo advantage. In this case, like the tempo of just reaching level 3 first to go off, where I felt like that was a bigger advantage. And both of us had fairly winning records with the deck, right? So it was like, well, this is interesting. Like, I'm not sure which of us was making the right decisions in those games. And it's probably somewhere in the middle, but it was,
it is definitely somewhere in the middle, but I'm glad you brought that up, because like, I remember at the beginning of the season when you guys were both on slimes, my win rate against Mitch, I don't think I took a single match against Mitch. I could remember like 2 games I won against him on slimes, because he would sit there and like, he'd play backup charger, and then he if he had to, he'd find another way to like just give up a turn, or, find a turn to not level. And like my win rate against you was a lot better than that. Like I don't know if it was ever positive, like while you were on slimes. But I was definitely like taking matches off of you.
Yeah.
And it was definitely because you were like rushing to 3 too quickly.
Yep.
And like that, like going into Chicago when Mitch was going to be playing slimes and he top 8'd, like I was really confident in his ability, like, you know, in how he would do it, specifically because like he had found these lines where you play a slightly slower game where you're not rushing to 3, and all of a sudden like you just have so many more options once you get to 3. And like Sylvie's a deck too, where there's so many of those cards that have they keep you at card parity, and then they also have defensive utility. So you aren't just going to like die to whatever. You can very much afford to take a turn or two off to you know, just build your hand up to huge amounts, just get to like 11 influence, and then you can, that's not an exaggeration. You actually can get to level 11 influence, and then all of a sudden like getting to level 3 is super easy, because you have so many extra cards. But if you don't have all those cards, like obviously the main way to do this, like the level 3's best friend is Dungeon Guide. This card buys you both cards and it buys you tempo by saving you a materialization. Like this is far and away like the biggest level 3 boon. Like I don't think we've found a successful level 3 deck in like competitive Grand Archive that has not played a set of Dungeon Guides, if I'm remembering that correctly.
I've tried to not do it before, and it's been wrong every single time. Yep. And this is honestly, Dungeon Guide is one of the biggest points of contention in the game when it comes to balance. There is and I don't mean to maybe bury the lead a little bit here on where you're going with this, but Dungeon Guide has been considered by many people, you know, a broken card, a bannable card, a card that shouldn't exist because of its, not necessarily, I think, because of its balance, because I think we've made a pretty good case for how cost ineffective it can be to get to level 3, especially when there are fairly aggressive decks out there that are ready to punish you if you level too quickly or something like you know, you just mentioned. I have faced plenty in the past. But really more about just the general ubiquity of the card and the fact that level 3 decks almost feel non-functional without it. And that, you know, I think I've seen calls for Dungeon Guide shouldn't be a card. Instead, the level 3s should start to be rebalanced better around the costs, so that, you know, there's a concern that the game revolves around finding Dungeon Guides, and the person who finds the Dungeon Guides wins. When it's built around it the current way. So I guess I'm just going to set the table a little bit for that discussion here, Taylor, and let you go ahead and lead this where you want, or respond to any of those comments the way you'd like to.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think like, especially in the competitive scene, right? I think Dungeon Guide is very much a necessity, right? So I think if you banned Dungeon Guide or got rid of it, or, you know, whatever, like I don't think you would see level 3 decks in the format at all anymore. Like they're just gone. Because they can't keep up with the aggressive decks or the level 2 decks that are like playing more of a mid-range game and just get to like beat you down before you get to level 3 and can start to outpower them and outcard advantage them. So, I mean, yeah, like on that point, yeah, it's kind of a weird balance spot, because like it clearly is like propping these level 3 decks up, but we want that, right? We want these decks in the format that are doing cool things, that are attacking the format in different angles. Like if everybody's bashing each other with allies, like that's really cool. Like that's a fun game, actually. Like it's very interactive. It's very skillful. I could tell that was
sarcasm or not right away.
No. I mean, it's a very like we all saw the finals. We didn't all see. If you haven't seen the finals of Ascent Houston, go watch them, because
we've pushed it. Like this is like the 5th podcast episode. We're like, you gotta watch this.
Like it's 2 extremely good players, 2 of the best players in the game, playing allies into each other, and it's an incredibly skillful match.
It really is.
Like there's so much interaction in there, right? Like that's a good game. Like if that's all Grand Archive was, it would still, I think, be a very, very cool game, and we're very much worth playing. But
like we said earlier, maybe not one that would appeal to me as much, right?
Exactly. Like there's really cool things about going to level 3 too, obviously. Like, right. It's cool to go scale up your power level and drop some bombs on your opponent. Like that's fun. Like It doesn't matter what's going on. Like that's really cool. As long as it's like balanced, right? So yeah, we banning Dungeon Guide to me, I think you really just don't want to be doing that. And I don't think you really want to try and balance level 3s for not having Dungeon Guide either, because I don't think you want to make the cost on them smaller. Like then you kind of get that same issue where like it's too free to get to level 3 then, right? Like that's kind of one of the big issues with Dungeon Guide is like it makes it more free. And so like you kind of have that like if the issue is like whoever finds Dungeon Guide wins because their level 3 was more free than somebody else's, or like they got it free in comparison to the level 1 who just didn't go there at all, right? Like rebalancing level 3 doesn't solve that problem. You just make it so like now everybody's playing level 3 decks into each other instead of like ally decks into each other. Which I think is actually much less interesting, because like now you're getting into the like haymaker kind of format. If you're familiar with a commander in MTG, that format is just like defined by haymakers. Like you get to the point of the game. Yeah, exactly. Like battle cruiser magic is what people call it, where you just have cards that win the game on their own. And that is like what a lot of level 3 strategies are too. Like there's a lot of level 3 cards that just win the game. And I don't think we want the format to devolve into that either, because like that, again, it's just who gets level 3 first then, and like gets there more efficiently, and who finds their battle cruiser first. Maybe
it actually upends even further the imbalance of winning the coin flip, playing first or going second. Like I think early on in this game, we had said quite a bit like, okay, well, there's a reason to go first, there's a reason to go second. And the reason to go second was getting combat phase first, getting to attack because your opponent has a spirit to attack. Reason to go first was the extra card. The reason to go first was the materialize first, getting the first materialize phase. And at this point, I'm happy to hang my hat up and say you should go first. You should choose to go first. I don't think there's even if your deck is like, well, I can, because there's some decks that are like, well, I can go second nicely. Like I think water decks with Icebound Slam are like the ones that can be like, yeah, I can slam down Icebound Slam turn 1 if you go second. That's cool. But even if you don't necessarily care as much about going first, your opponent certainly does in most scenarios. And you would rather take that from them, even if it gains you less. So I think that it's a really interesting point, and just a point in the favor of keeping a card like Dungeon Guide around. That if Dungeon Guide was around, I agree that I think level 3 decks are a lot less playable. You win games without seeing Dungeon Guide. Let's be clear about that.
Absolutely.
But they become a lot less playable compared to the powerful aggression that we see in the game. And when they become less playable, that you have to rebalance something to make them more playable. And if you rebalance the level 3s to just be cheaper or better or something, then I don't know what reason you have to not go to level 3, right? So it's almost like it's sort of this important cog in the puzzle. And instead, what we've seen Weebs the Shore do, which I wasn't 100% on right away a couple sets ago, just kind of watching things as they start to sprinkle in pieces of interaction with Dungeon Guide into the game. And I personally feel like instead we have a super robust and interesting gameplay system now, specifically with Mortal Ambition, specifically with the addition of Heavenly Guide to the game now. We saw in Mercurial Heart, we saw Stifling Trap, and we also saw Eternal. I can only think of Eternal Witness
Magistrate.
Right Magistrate, thank you. Oh my God, I was only thinking of a magic card. We talked about magic too much. Maternal Magistrate and Stifling Trap in set 4, which produced, at least gave Wind this interesting, like specifically Tristan, who was running these for a while, but also the Automaton deck, these interesting outs to being like, okay, well now I've stifled your Dungeon Guide, and as a slime player, I saw enough of that. I was getting pretty frustrated with that. But then, this sort of Magistrate gameplay, Magistrate comes down like, oh, okay, now I wanted the Dungeon Guide next turn. I got to find a way to get this thing off the board before I can do that. And those are nice. But now we have the addition of Heavenly Guide to the puzzle, which I have started to see players I play with locally who now know that I played Heavenly Guide somewhere in my 70x cards in the deck, whether it's in my sideboard and the main board. And they're just like, I'm not going to Dungeon Guide anymore. I refuse. I straight refuse to do it. Because one time I went like Heavenly Guide Zephyr and Tristan, and they're like, nope, never again. And to me, like what this has created is just such a much more interesting puzzle now, where there is a potential cost to Dungeon Guide.
Yep.
Not enough to not play Dungeon Guide, but enough to make any context of any game be kind of like, I have to actually think now whether or not it's worth me doing this, because I know my opponent might punish me for it, whether that be through a stifling trap or a Heavenly Guide or something now.
Yeah. And we could go through a whole podcast here on Dungeon Guide and how it, like, the fun interactions that there are that are available against it and for it now, and what it, what it means for the game and everything like that. But it really kind of what it all really boils down to here is that it's really helpful for getting to level 3. It's, if you are using it while you're at level 2, it buys you a card back because you get to just banish 2 cards to level up instead of 3. I mean, technically you lose the third one because like the dungeon guide's on the field, but it's also a 1/3, which is not an irrelevant ally, right? Like fire can play Cremation Ritual to get cards back. Wind has ways to buff it. Water also has like ways to do things with it. So like Primordial Ritual can use it to put more floating memory in the graveyard. So like it's a relevant piece. Like it's like 2.5 cards instead of 3, I would say, that you've gone down. And then of course it buys you that whole materialization phase. So like this is exactly what you need to get to level 3 in a timely manner. And yeah, I mean, if you're going to level 3, play it. The next thing to kind of help you get to level 3 is floating memory. So like Dan mentioned earlier, normally if you're going to level 3, you've got to play cards out in order to get cards into your memory to actually materialize a new level. That's just how the game works. A lot of cards, if you're just playing a card and like you're playing a 2/3 ally for 3, it's kind of like you're paying 2 cards to go to level 1 or 3 cards to level 2 instead of, just 1 or 2. Because that ally, like he said earlier, just like Dungeon Guide, is not going to go back to your hand. It's on the field now, for better or for worse. Like, there's ways to like to reclaim these allies with Reclaim, which is a wind card, which will put it back into your hand, which also has floating memory. So insane, awesome value for your influence. Value.
Reclaim is so good. Oh my
Reclaim
God.
is goated.
That card's so sick.
Yep. It's dope. But yeah, like, so this ally is normally without Reclaim, it's just on the field now. So cards that have floating memory. So that's why like Swift Recruit is so powerful in these level 3 decks, right? It's also pretty powerful in like non-level 3 decks too, just because 1/2 Interceptor with floating memory for 2 is really good. But if your opponent wants to attack you at all, they've got to go through Swift Recruit. So you can put 2 cards down to play Swift Recruit. You can use those to level. You can wait a turn, whatever, right? If they're attacking you at all, they've got to go through Swift Recruit. That means that card's going to go into the graveyard at some point. You can use that floating memory now that's in the graveyard to level up. So it's a way to like kind of keep card parity as you're leveling. In kind of like a not necessarily floating memory, but like you'll see like Luxem Xander decks do this, where they'll play Juggle Knives, which is just a 2-cost card that deals 1 damage to target champion, and then it also draws a card. So it essentially is like putting 2 memory or 2 cards into your memory for free for no cost. It doesn't cost you a card to do this. Like there's other cards that do this. Scry the Skies does this. Basically any card that is also drawing you a card will do this, right? Windmill Engineer,
Baby Gray Slime.
Baby Gray Slime. Like, right. These are all going to replace themselves. So that's essentially what you're doing with like these floating memory cards as well. Fast Cure is another card that has floating memory, kind of replaces itself. Reprogram, we've seen. All these cards are going to help you get to higher levels without actually making you play extra cards from your hand.
You're just trying to make my editing time take much longer right now. But
you don't have to throw all of these up.
I'm not going to. But I just wanted to point out, like, just to really hammer home the idea here is that, like, I think people, when they start the game, their math on how to get to level 3 is a little messed up, because they think it's you lose 6 cards, and it's more like, without some of these effects, it's you lose 9 cards to get to 3. Yeah. Because you have to put something down in order to get the cards into your memory. And so whenever you see a card with floating memory, you see a Swift Recruit, it's not that it's like plus a card itself per se. It's that
Hmm.
it allows you to only banish one instead of having lost a card and banished one to get to level 1. Only banish 2 instead of having lost a card and banished 2. That's the way that I think is the best way to think about these cards when you start analyzing your own gameplay and your own card pool, and you're trying to put together these decks, your level 3 decks, and you want to figure out how you're trying to empower the next generation of brewers here. You got to figure out how to get your character to level 3 efficiently. That's kind of the math that you're doing when you think about that with both floating memory and card advantage cards.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, what was previously the gold standard card, another card that early in the game people were begging to have banned, or, pleading or you're arguing for anyway, was Creative Shock.
Yep.
So Creative Shock, when it was first released, was pretty much the only card that was like pure card advantage at basic elements and norm. Like there were a couple other things, but it was really, Creative Shock was like the cleanest +1 you could get. And so Creative Shock is a 3-cost fast fire action mage spell. You draw 2 cards, you discard 1. And then with Mage Class bonus, if the card you discarded was a fire element card, you choose a unit and deal 2 damage to it. So the 2 damage part on its face is like, oh, hey, it's also kind of a removal spell, but that's not where the card advantage comes in. The card advantage is that you can discard floating memory to this, obviously, the same way you discard to like Hasty Messenger or something. And now you've actually gone up a card. Your hand is the same influence that you had previously, except you have 1 extra floating memory in your graveyard. It was, still awesome card, still played very, very heavily today. Cornerstone of Merlin decks, still dope. We have some other cards that are doing things like this now. So there's less of an eye on Creative Shock. The kind of the boogeyman of the format now is, like Dan mentioned earlier, Baby Gray Slime. Right? This is everywhere. And the way you get ahead with Baby Gray Slime is that you play Baby Gray, you draw a card, and then you get to play Escape the Wreckage, which is going to put Baby Gray back into your memory and also draw another card into your memory. So similar to how, like, you use Cremation Ritual with floating memory allies, you use Creative Shock with floating memory. This is also putting you up 1 more card. And it's one of the reasons why, like, for Sylvie, it's so important to like take a turn to do backup charger, because it also lets you have time to put stuff into your play an ally and put it back into your memory with Escape the Wreckage. Like you create this huge giant snowball of influence that, when you go to level 2, you also are probably going to go to level 3 with Dungeon Guide, and then you have like 1 million cards in hand still to play out 1 million slimes and just wreck your opponent.
I just, on the subject of Escape the Wreckage, we mentioned Reclaim earlier as well. Again, hammering home this math thing, but when you put down an ally to level or whatever, if you find a way to return that ally back to your hand or back to your memory, it doesn't matter. It goes back to your influence. You have negated that 1 card loss. So instead of 2 to go to 1, it's only 1 at that point. As long as the card that you played to get the ally back generated another card itself. And that's where Reclaim's floating memory counts it as that, or Escape the Wreckage's draw into memory counts it as that as well. So you get the escape back, but you also got the ally back that was previously a gone card. And then if that ally themselves drew a card, that is the cornerstone of this Vanitas deck that we talked about in the last episode. That really made that deck like function, was just like, okay, well, I can just dig infinite cards, draw infinite cards. It played Escape, it played Reclaim, it played Windmill, it played Baby Gray Slime. It played all of them, had this insane card draw engine, and then just nuked you out of nowhere. Instead of going to 3, it was like, okay, cool, I have like 800 cards, and now I'd play 3 Razor Gales and you're dead. But talk all about that in the last episode.
Yeah, honestly, I think we'll see that as if Baby Gray doesn't end up on the ban list, which it very well could, since it's sitting at category 3 or category 2 right now. I definitely see that as like another shell for wind level 3 decks that we haven't really seen yet. I mean, Tristan uses like half of it. She's got some other really good cards where I don't think she really wants to include slimes and get that going, but like. Merlin could do it. Sylvie honestly has a really cool level 3 deck in Wind with all the slimes and Windmill and Reclaims as well, which is slightly overshadowed by her just norm slime build at the moment because you get so much really crazy slime efficiency. But it creates like a really safe way for her to get to Terra. think like Jin will see some really cool wind builds as well. Like I think that's currently like underused as a level 3 mechanism at the moment. Like I think Vanitas really was like kind of the canary in the coal mine, actually, which is a weird thing to say considering how busted that deck was. But like we might see some really sweet winless utilizing these engines, especially because like one of the other way, like the other thing you really need to get to level 3 is you need to survive, right? Because you're taking all these turns off, you're materializing a bunch of cards that don't do anything really on their own. I mean, that's not true. Like your levels usually have a good effect. Like that's why you're playing these levels as well. But they usually aren't like keeping you alive. So you need to be like figuring out how to stay alive while your opponent is beating you down while you're leveling up. And like, again, Baby Gray is just like an excellent example of a card you can use to do this while continuing to gain card advantage, because not only does it enter and draw you a card, it also has intercept. So it's going to protect you from attackers. And then again, like Escape the Wreckage, you can play that in response to intercepting an attack. So now all of a sudden the attack is negated. Baby Gray is safely in your memory. You're up a million cards. You're in really good shape, right? Excellent stuff going on there. Like, just like, again, like this is like the gold standard of ways to get to the level 3. Other cards that are really good though, even if they're not replacing themselves, like they're just keeping you alive really well. Cards like Resolute Stand, actually, I really like in my level 3 decks. These are cards that are going to be really useful because they're cards you can use to put cards in memory while having a strong effect if you need that. You don't really want to use it that way because obviously, like you're going down another card in order to level up. So now you've banished 2 and played 1, and so now you're down 3 cards really to go to level 2. But it keeps you alive as well. It also is like got a sick level 2+ effect where you can play it for free at the cost of a draw. Your next draw phase, like that's
level 2+ only.
Really, really useful. Like these are the cards you need in order to like actually like buy you the time to get to level 3 safely. We see Luxem Xander play things like Vanish from Sight, and which works really well in that deck too because it gives you stealth for the turn. But then Xander level 2 can bring that back from the graveyard to your hand. So it's like a pseudo Baby Gray where you play it for some effect, it replaces itself, and now you're just banishing 2 cards to get to level 2 instead of 2 plus however many you spent. How many cards you had to play to get there, right? So a lot of these cards are really going to help you get to level 3. And then once you're at level 3, like you can still use these survivability cards in order to like continue to buy time to draw enough of your level 3 cards to actually take over the game. Which again is like what Luxem Xander does with Vanish from Sight. Like again, you get there, you need to a turn or 2 on level 3 so you can get his reveal recollection triggers, and then you win the game because you just take it over.
Yeah. The survivability also, I think Luxem really highlighted the effectiveness of just kind of jamming a bunch of survival cards into the deck. And really just hinging on the fact that once he gets to 3, he gains a lot of inevitability. And that's really the way a lot of these level 3 decks need to be, though. They kind of need to have that either some gigantic burst, some like Exodia win con, or they just need to then go like, well, now that I'm here, I just like gain control of the game and eventually I will win. And I think that like the covers a lot of the ways that you get to 3, a lot of the reason you go to 3, a lot of what we enjoy about it, a lot of the competitive angles of even just like why you would do this in the first place, what kind of decks have been effective with it. And I can just say that I hope the most exciting thing for me every set is seeing whatever new level 3 champions come out. It's like the thing that I can't wait the most for. And we're looking forward now to set 6. We're looking forward to Abyssal Heaven. And Abyssal Heaven is bringing, just as I had hoped, 2 more new Recollection decks, which will feature some lovely new characters, new level 3s. We have a Terra Cleric, which is going to... Taylor here is just hoping that brings some more Kongming spice for him in the so hopefully some cards that say cleric / mage on them, or just aren't class bonus or something. And on my side, we have what appears to be a Luxem Tamer in Guoja, who like based on what I'm seeing in the sort of the teaser cards that were placed in Mortal Ambition, the Luxem Tamer cards there, Sounds like a what if Xander and Sylvie had a child, which might actually be illegal. So I hope that's not the lore behind this. But as far as their effects, that sounds really exciting to me, just as like animals and beasts everywhere and revealing your Luxem cards and all that stuff sounds really fun. So I can't wait to see what new level 3s we have. I can't wait to jam dungeon guides in those decks, and I can't wait to continue to make Mike second guess whether or not he should play his dungeon guides at all in my level 3 decks where I have Heavenly Guides somewhere. It's in there somewhere, I promise. I don't know if I've sided it in against you. I might have just not, because you're not going to play Dungeon Guide anyway.
But what you need to start doing is just shuffle your whole sideboard into your deck and then pull cards out, and then he'll have no idea.
Oh my God, that's such a strat. Yes.
Yeah.
That's such a good idea.
You would psych him out so much. But yeah, I mean, like as a competitive player, I'll play whatever it takes to win, right? If I have to play allies, I'll play allies. If I have to play Nico, I'll play Nico. God forbid if I have to play slimes, I'll play slimes. But
no, you won't. You won't.
Had I gone to Singapore, I 100% would have played slimes. So
oh my God,
I would. Yes, absolutely.
Oh my God.
Had we put the advantages deck together before Toronto, I might have been playing that. If I could not have talked myself into saying Merlin could beat it. And I don't think I would have actually after, if we had tested that enough. So I'll play what it takes to win. But my preference heavily is to play really cool level 3 decks. Like I want to play Jhin. I want to be immortal. I want to play Merlin. I want to do cool Crux stuff. I want to play some Luxem BS. Like that's what I want to do. I want to have these really cool effects going off. I don't want to play Sylvie because she's the worst, but all the other level 3s are very cool. So yeah, I mean, it just lets you live out kind of like the fun power fantasy that everybody likes to play these like fantasy TCGs for. Like, everybody wants to be the hero, right? So like go find your level 3 of choice, build it up, figure out what makes it tick, how you get to level 3 safely and start taking over the games and just have some fun with it. Like these are, in my opinion, the best way to play the game, or the most fun way to play the game, I should say. The best way to play the game right now, I actually don't know. It's hard to say like what the best strategy is at the moment. After 3 visits was errated, like everything's kind of up in the air. My guess is it's still Sylvie. So like that's there you go. There's your level 3 deck if that's what you're looking for.
Christchurch is soon, so we'll
have an idea. Actually, I mean that's going to be our next episode. Like when we'll be recording the Thursday after Christchurch. So we'll be going into what went well, what did not go well, who had a good time, who had a bad time, and probably what we'll be looking at, upcoming for Santa Clara, because that's only like another 3 weeks after Christchurch. So we've got some like really tight kind of tournaments coming up here. Regionals are starting as well. There's a bunch this weekend, one in Virginia, a couple in other places that I don't remember because people haven't been talking about them in our Discord, but they're somewhere. I know they are. So, if you feel spicy, put a level 3 deck together for that too. So anyway, this has been the Recollection Step. I'm mumbling and ranting and going off at this point. So
I gotta go build my newest Jhin deck. So
exactly. Yes. So we got to figure out what people are going to be playing. So, but yeah, thank you very much for listening. Again, we'll be back. We'll talk about Christchurch. After that though, I do want to say I think we're going to try and get another like theory episode in like this before Santa Clara. Because I think the schedule lines up where like the week before Santa Clara we have another recording. So I want to get another theory episode in, probably around kind of like who's the beatdown. Like that's something we haven't quite gone over yet, and that's okay. I think a lot of people would really appreciate. I know I would appreciate talking about it and going over it myself because it's hard to figure out in this game.
Yeah, it can be tough.
Like even level 3 decks like kind of have to be the beatdown sometimes. Well, I think that's going to be the plan then. So. Anyway, thanks everyone for listening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Bye everyone. I'll let Taylor keep talking the whole time. Keep going, Taylor.
Yep. I got all night. It's early yet.